Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're incredibly excited to officially launch the first TYCon Webinar Series. A little bit about the series. Every month, we're going to be featuring a live webinar that brings in a bunch of guest speakers. We're going to be discussing a whole range of topics from culture, politics, professional spaces, whatever you guys want to hear about. And our primary goal with this series is to just create a space where students and young professionals can hear from their peers, particularly with similar backgrounds. We're going to go beyond topics that are typically discussed in the classroom and unique to the experiences of Chinese Americans. So today's webinar is titled Navigating Chinese Etiquette, and we're going to be hearing from Raymond Yao, who will share his experience as an American interning in China this past summer. He's going to discuss the intricacies of navigating Chinese culture, particularly in professional and business settings, while offering some practical advice for us and sharing his insight. Before we dive in, I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers, moderators, and also, coincidentally, this is our webinar team. I'll start. My name is Tatiana Nazimov, and I'm acting as the Director of Professional and Educational Programs for TYCon. I'm a junior at Princeton studying public policy and international affairs, and I will be moderating today's discussion and asking some of the questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raymond Yao. I'm currently a second year at UCI studying electrical engineering. I'm also involved in the TYCon Webinar program, and I'm also the SoCal regional lead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Remy Rong. I am a senior at Penn State. I study marketing, and I am a combat medic for the U.S. Army.
Great. So to talk about the topic a little bit, the reason we chose Chinese etiquette for our first webinar is partially something I would like to talk about is as an international affairs major, I can't help but note how China is playing a really big role in business settings globally, technology, politics, just along all fronts. I feel like increasingly more and more students and professionals are finding themselves working with or studying Chinese companies, colleagues, politics, whatever it may be. And as children of Chinese immigrants, I feel as though we are very uniquely positioned to succeed in such spaces. We probably understand the language, culture, and history far better and from a much more personal standpoint than most. But one thing I will say, as American or Canadian born individuals, we often do miss some of the fundamental cultural norms or unspoken rules that are pretty important to operate successfully in business settings. Very small details like how to address someone, how to politely decline a drink, when to pay the bill are very important in how you are perceived in Chinese culture. And more often than not, these misunderstandings are not coming from a place of, misinformation or we just don't have the intelligence. It's just not knowing what's expected in certain situations. So to help us navigate this very tricky topic, we will be hearing from Raymond, who spent his last summer interning at an AI software company in China. So to get us started, Raymond, why don't you introduce yourself briefly? What do you do? Tell us about your Chinese background, etc.
So I'm a second year at UCI studying electrical engineering. So I'm at ABC, which is American-born Chinese. So growing up, I mainly spoke Chinese at my house to my parents and grandparents. So that was the main factor of me, maintaining my Chinese proficiency. I also did a lot of writing when I was a kid, and that did really help a lot, but I kind of slowed down on that. But mainly it's the speaking that I maintain, and I still speak it every day at home. So yeah.
That's great. That's much better than me, I'll say. And before we dive into specific questions about etiquette, why don't you tell us about what your experience was like this summer, especially with your language ability? How did you assimilate? Where were you working? How did you like it?
So I worked at Laplace AI Lab in Shanghai. It's a small AI software company. They were originally based in California, but they moved back to China in the summer of 2024. So I met the boss at the Tsinghua Alumni Conference in LA, which is the big one they have every 2 years. I was mingling around and I found him. I talked to him. He was very impressed by my Chinese ability, and I asked him if I could come to his company. At the time, I wasn't that familiar with all the AI stuff going on. I wanted to learn more about it, and I thought this was a very good opportunity, especially since I wanted to, go back to China and actually live there. Interning at the company, I stayed there for roughly around 3 months. I left right after school ended, which was around mid-June. And then I finished my internship there around, let's say, early September. I think it was a very interesting experience. I mean, I study electrical, which is hardware. It's not very related to software stuff, but it did teach me a lot about how to actually live and work in China, especially.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up, do you see yourself going back? I know 3 months is a pretty extended period of time. How was that?
I feel like living there for 3 months, I really just disassociated myself with like living in US. Like I completely was absent from American society. And I think it's a very interesting thing. I think I encourage everyone to do that. It lets you look at your own like normal life in a different perspective. Like you live in a country, foreign country, and you adapt to the culture for like around 3 months. It's a lot. Like you'll come back a different, very, very different person.
Yeah.
So, Raymond, I have a question for you. So, when I was growing up in China, I remember my mom would constantly yell at me, it's like, "啊，好丢人，没面子这样子." So, like, how does the concept of 面子 or face show up in everyday interactions in China, especially in professional settings?
I think 面子, it's a very broad term. It's not just like your face or anything. It's more about your physical appearance and how you act in front of others. It's basically the person you show to, everyone else that doesn't know you super well. So you have to be very polite. I wouldn't say it's just your like actions, also your appearance. Like for example, when you're going to work, obviously you need to dress up in a specific attire, right? That is, appropriate for that setting. That's basically kind of what like 面子 is. Same thing with speaking. You also have to be very like polite. As well, especially with we can go on to like name calling later, but name calling is also a very important part of maintaining the face or 面子. Yeah.
How do you decide whether to use someone's first name, last name, or uh, their titles in different situations?
So this one's very important to me, especially since now I'm like, I'm a young, I can't really like get away with certain things. I have to, stick to like the cultural norms and stuff. Because as a kid, you just call everyone like 叔叔 or 阿姨. That's very acceptable and is a really safe option, right? But now that you're older, there's some things you have to pay attention to. It's very subtle. I think my rule of thumb is you always start very high, like prestige, like you call them a very high title, and then you go down when you get closer to them. I think for me is, let's say I'm working at the company, right? And I'm talking to my boss in the work setting. You usually call them by their last name, followed with 总. 总 means like usually like general or commander, some sort. Like you don't call them 老板. Like that's just like that's a little bit different. But for example, my boss, his name is Yi Guanxi, right? His last name is Yi. So when I talk to him in the like during work, I say Yi Zong. So it's the last name and then Zong. That's very important. And then once you get closer to them or whatever, then they can tell you, oh, I want you to call me by my name, Guanxi. So I just call him Guanxi. Well, this company was very interesting. They also had some English names, so sometimes I would just call them by their English names. Like I call the CTO, I call him Joe. But when I first met him, I called him Gu Zong because his last name was Gu, and he was also the CTO, so I called him Gu Zong. But then later on, when I got closer to him, he was just like, "Oh, you can just call me Joe." I was like, "Okay, I'll call you Joe." Yeah, that's so. It's just you start from very high and then you go down based on how close you get to them. Yeah.
And the format is last name, then job title, or last name or rank.
Yeah, yeah. Usually, if they allow it, then you can call them just by their name. Yeah, it's very easy.
So I actually spent a short period of time living in China when I was a kid. And I remember during orientation at a Chinese elementary school, my father brought a huge box of cigarette to the school principal. And is that kind of expected when you do business in China or when you're trying to say like get on someone's good side or you're trying to get someone to like you in a business or formal setting? Is that the norm?
Yeah, it usually is the norm. Like when you're conducting business with someone, especially if they're older than you, it's best to give them a gift. Usually like a box of really good cigarettes or alcohol, that's usually permissible. I think for me, when I was giving my gift, I knew them, I knew the CEO and the CTO pretty well after like a few months, so I knew what to get them. I knew their interests, so I got them based on that. Like they like playing guitar, so I got them very interesting like guitar stuff, like guitar picks and stuff. But usually, if you don't know them that well and you're just meeting them, like cigarettes, a nice box of cigarettes or a nice bottle of alcohol is the good thing to do. Yeah.
Speaking of alcohol, I assume alcohol is going to be involved in, say, business dinners or events after work. So people are going to be pouring shots. And if someone is repeatedly offered alcohol but doesn't drink, what is the most polite way to respond without offending anyone?
I think for alcohol, it really depends. Obviously, the boss, sometimes there are stories where they will force their employees to drink with them. And if the employee declines, then that's going to ruin their, job security. But most cases, I would say if you're not comfortable with that, I think the best way to word it is to say, "Oh, I'm protecting my health," right? But do not like shame the other people for taking a shot or drinking alcohol, because you're saying, "Oh, this is my personal like preference. I don't want to, drink alcohol. I have these reasons." But you also have to be very, very polite about it. Don't say no. Just say, "Oh, I have to do this, or I have to preserve my health or something." Yeah. Do not say no though, because that will it'll kind of ruin your like mians, in my opinion. Yeah. Yeah. Always
Understood.
to be extra, extra nice and polite. Yeah.
Another thing that happens at the dinner table quite often is people will kind of fight to pay the bill at the end of the dinner. And I remember this happened a lot between my parents and my friends' parents whenever we all have dinner together. So is it expected for you to kind of take the initiative to pay the bill at a group meal? When do you just kind of let the other person win whenever you're in the fight?
I don't have that much experience for it. I wasn't, involved in actually fighting over the bill, but same as you, I did see a lot of people, fight over the bill over many meals. But I think in business terms, I think you could look at it this way. If you're the one who invites the other person to dinner, you should end up paying for it, right? Because you invite them and they're attending your, event. So you should be in charge of everything. But if it's more of like casual and friends, I guess it's just who has, who's more ferocious, I guess. Whoever can, convince the other person to let them pay is I guess the winner. But yeah, business is if you invite the person, then you should pay or end up paying. Yeah, you can still like, entertain, like the fake fight or whatever, but at the end of the day, it should be you. Yeah.
Right. So shifting away a little bit from the dining and drinking culture, I want to talk a little bit about like networking. I'm curious as to what networking looked like in China for you and how does it differ from maybe traditional American networking styles? I know in the US, I guess it depends on what sector you're in, but there's a lot of coffee chat, etc. Is it similar in China? What was your experience?
Well, networking, there's a lot to cover. I think the fundamental difference between American networking, or at least networking in Western culture and networking in Eastern culture, is that your status is like very, very obvious. There's a hierarchy. Every time there's an event, there is a very clear hierarchy. I feel like in Western cultures, everyone's around the same, right? You go to this networking event, you're all on the same like level. So you can easily talk to anyone, right? So you can just walk up to someone and say, "Hey, I want to talk with you," right? That's very easy. But in Chinese culture, at least, you have to know your place that's relative to others. For example, me, I'm just a college student, right? And in these networking environments, I have to know that I'm technically below them and that these people who can offer me a position or whatever, they're up here, right? So when I'm talking to them, I have to be aware that they're in this position and they're expecting me to act and do things a certain way, right? I feel like from my experience, it's mostly casual, especially since I was never really in those very formal business dinners or networking events. I'd say the one main networking event I went to was the World AI Conference in Shanghai. That one is just like a normal convention. It's very similar to Western. Like you just go up to any booth, you can talk to them and do whatever. But I think I would say for dinners, the seating is very important too. You know how
Mhm.
like those big round tables and
The
like
big round table,
yeah,
yeah.
with the rotating glass stuff. Like
Mhm.
your seating there also determines a lot. If you're the big guy like Lao Da, you're usually sitting in the most
Yeah.
inner seat. So you're the one facing the door. And then I believe if it was your second command, it's sitting to their left or right. I forgot, but it's to their side. And then everyone else is more like, on the sides. And then if you're the lowest person, you're usually sitting with your back facing the door. And why is because every time like new food comes up, you're the one in charge of distributing. I
Mm.
feel like in Chinese business, everyone has there's a certain like hierarchy. You just have to know how to navigate it.
Yeah, I have a follow-up about the hierarchy. You said when you're in these networking events as a college student, you have to know that you are below these like older professionals that might give you a job. Has that ever stopped you from maybe going up and talking to someone? Like, is there a limit to who you can interact with, do you feel? Or is it more so just being very mindful about how you approach it?
There is a limit, in my opinion. It's just if you want to go talk to them and you want something from them, right? You have to think, okay, what can I offer to them? It might sound weird. I mean, as a college student, what can you offer to these, very big tech people? I mean,
Yeah.
what can you do? I think for me, I looked at my case. I feel like, okay, I'm I have this unique place where I understand Chinese culture and Western culture. And I feel like in the future, if they want to have some sort of person running things in the US for them that they trust, I feel like I could offer that, right? So when I'm talking to them, I have to make that very, very clear, which brings me to remember something. I think you need to establish your position immediately when you meet someone. For example, let's say you meet up at a dinner with someone and there's multiple people. You need to introduce yourself to every single one of them first. That's the first thing you do. And you need to say your rank and position, whatever, like your background. Then they'll know how to address you. The reason why they do this is because at these dinners, right, they want everything to run very smoothly. And if no one knows like their position or whatever, then it's very hard to like talk amongst each other. But once that you establish that immediately, it like conversations flow very, very smoothly. People know how to act, right? Because you don't want to accidentally like offend someone who's like very, very high up there, right? Or you don't want to like treat someone who's very low and, make them something like super big. It's very important that you set like your hierarchy immediately before you do anything.
So to wrap up this discussion portion, if you had to give the people watching maybe 3 key pieces of advice for successfully operating and thriving in China based on your experience, what would they be?
3, let's see. Well, first, most important, like, is to get your Chinese skills up. I think it's very hard to learn, especially when you're older, but the easiest thing you can manage is your speaking. Practice it every day, find someone to talk to. Or even, I would say, my strategy is listen to, like, any podcasts or books or songs.
Yeah.
That will help a lot. And if you have the time, maybe try to get the writing and reading up. But that is already very hard by itself. So that's just the language. Get that. That's the most important thing. I think for number 2, there's a lot I want to say, but like I'm trying to find the most important thing that really made my experience very good.
You could try to like lump it all into under one general
Let's
piece of
see.
advice if you want. Like say as much as you want.
I think is to take advantage of like your your nationality. I think that's another important thing. Even though if you go back to China and you do all these stuff with these people, you're still technically a foreigner to them, right? You were born in a different country, you're from a different country, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And especially like they they view it as something unique, right? It's also be even though you look exactly like them, it's a little bit different. Like, for example, if someone my age in China try to talk to these people and work at these places, it's very, very hard because they view them as, a college student in China. But when I go, even though I'm also a college student, they view me as more of like a point of contact in the future, mainly because I'm from the US. So I feel like you shouldn't be ashamed that you're a Chinese American, you know? You shouldn't be ashamed. Like you should let people know that you are. So then they know how to deal with you or treat you.
It's like taking advantage the different perspectives that we can bring
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
to them.
leverage that
Yes.
identity.
Yes. Use that to your full advantage. Like don't like hide it. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't be ashamed of it. Okay. And then the final advice is don't be afraid to like ask for help. Especially if you're young, they know that you're learning. You need to show them that you want this, right? That you're passionate about it. And I think Chinese people, they especially when they want to maintain their own nuances, they want to, give you these benefits because that's also on them to, maintain that, face and outside image.
Yep.
Yeah. So don't be afraid. So final recap, I think first is get the language up, is to get your Chinese ability speaking, especially. Number 2, don't be ashamed of your dual identity. Number 3 is don't be afraid to ask for help. Yeah.
Okay, noted. Thank you so much, Raymond, for sharing your experience. And thank you to everyone who joined us to watch our very first TYCon webinar. If you enjoyed today's session or you learned anything, be sure to stay tuned for future webinars. You can watch the recordings through our official platforms and soon to be our YouTube channel. I do want to plug that our February webinar will be featuring guest speaker Oliver Ma, who, if you don't know, is running for Lieutenant Governor of California. He graduated UC Berkeley, Harvard Law. He's a practicing civil rights lawyer and is now running for office, which is very cool. And we're super excited to speak with him soon. It'll also be a very unique opportunity for you guys to listen in as well as ask questions and participate. So just continue checking our social media and newsletter for registration, as well as locking down a time and a date. Additionally, if you have any feedback, questions, or even ideas for future webinars, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me directly. My email is my first name dot my last name at tyconnect.org. So tatiana.nazimov@tyconnect.org. Feel free to shoot me an email. Thank you so much again, and we hope to see you next month.